I've plateaued. How do I grow without seeing more people per hour or shortening my treatment times? I don't want to max out patient numbers. I want to have a sustainable practice that doesn't feel like I'm just scamming people. All right, this is a cool question. There's a few things to unpack here. One of them, the first one is, let's just do the deep one first. This language, like, I don't want to feel like I'm just scamming people. What I found with this comes from two things. One is that the actual results you get, when they become more predictable, that little like devil on your shoulder, which is, it's good. It's good to have that devil on your shoulder that keeps you accountable. Like, I don't want to be scamming people. The trouble with that is if that devil on the shoulder gets out of hand, it'll start just undermining everything you're trying to do. It just goes nuts. It's excessive, right? It's a way to kind of keep like a check and balance on your morality, which is good. But the more predictable your results are, the more clinical clarity you have, the more confident you are in your process because you've done it a bunch of times and you know you're delivering life-changing results for people, the more that voice will quiet down responsibly because you're not scamming people. And so you know you're not scamming them, and they know you're not scamming them because they're getting better. They're getting their life back. So that's the first part, is like, let's handle the big gnarly mindset issue here, which is, it's a good thing to have that check and balance, that little devil on the shoulder, but we want to make sure that we're not letting that run the entire show, because otherwise you're going to undercut yourself all the time and you're never going to make any money because you're going to have a weird relationship with money, thinking every time you accept it, you're just going to scam somebody or let them down. So the way to handle that, clinical clarity, right? That's one of the biggest pieces, because once you start to map this stuff out, and again, this was, I don't know, I was in practice for like damn near 10 years before I'd even started to figure this stuff out. You guys, some of you are new. You shouldn't be waiting that long to get to those levels. That's part of my job, is to accelerate that, right? But be able to map out your thinking and thread the pearls, right? So there is a logical framework. There's an order of operations for the human body. This isn't just random stuff we pick up from all our different mentors and teachers and books and everything else, and then just like hope for the best. Because when you do that, even though it's well-intentioned, oftentimes it works. But when you do that, that devil on the shoulder is right, because you're really relying on luck, not a process. Sometimes we call that intuition. We go, ooh, yeah, I'm just really intuitive. I don't know why I chose to do this, but I did and it worked. And sometimes that's just luck. You just got lucky. Now, some people have this intuition that is very powerful and very strong, but also we can then look at that and go, well, here's why I was thinking what I was thinking. And there's kind of a whole brain there with two hemispheres coordinating, right? There's the irrational intuitive part and there's the rational logical part. And when we understand what we're doing from that capacity, that's a different type of intuition. It's very fast and usually very accurate. But in the meantime, there is this kind of mistake we make where it's like we get lucky and then we don't know how we did it. And we call it intuition, but really it's just luck. We can't necessarily reproduce it all the time. It's not super reliable. And in fact, long-term, we can start to distrust our intuition if we keep relying on it that way. And it's just not it's trying to make a fish climb a tree. It's not a fair thing to do with your intuition. You're stretching it. You're putting it in a context in which it can't thrive. So that's a bit of a tangent here, but the main thing is have a clinical clarity algorithm organized so that you know the process and the twists and the turns and the kind of forking decision branches and all these kinds of things. Once you have that, you can have a much different conversation with the people you're going to work with, and a much different conversation with yourself, because you know you're not scamming them, because you're going to take them through the best process possible to increase their probability of healing, right? This is a big deal. So when that does happen, you can stand behind your prices quite easily. Now, the second piece to this, the one part is clinical clarity, right? But the other part is fractal systems and looking at your offer structures. Because if you're selling, you got to look at your incentives. Because if you're selling visit by visit, even if you're not 100% only financially motivated, like you're just trying to grab cash off of people, right? Even if you don't have that, you're still kind of put in that box because your income is tied to every time they come into your office. Now, there are kind of some different ways around that. You don't have to totally break that model to still thrive within it. I'm a big fan of having packages, things like that. It's still essentially getting paid per visit. Another way to look at it is these membership models where you get paid over a period of time, not necessarily per session. So somebody could have an annual membership or a monthly membership at your clinic or whatever that is. And monthly membership includes X amount of visits. And while this may sound like 6 one, half dozen the other, what you're essentially doing is you're encouraging people to make the most of their visits. So you're not going to have people kind of dropping off and skipping or whatever else. You're aligned to getting them as better as possible, as fast as possible, with the least amount of visits, because they've paid a flat fee for a membership. And now it's up to you how much time you spend to deliver that, right? So you can actually change different models. And it's the same thing for the people coming. Maybe you might find that they would prefer to get better in less visits as well, right? So it's kind of interesting because when we put our value on the number of visits, that means they get better faster for cheaper. But actually, a lot of times people would pay more to get better faster. So the example here to think about is plumbers, dentists, anybody that you've paid to do a job to help you with something, right? I would much rather have my dental visit be done faster. I don't want to pay my dentist per hour. I want to pay my dentist per job or per procedure and get me in and out as fast as possible, right? If my plumber comes to fix something, I want them in and out of my house as fast as possible. And that's okay. I'm happy to pay them to do the job quickly and get it done versus like stringing it along. And it's the same thing with our work. The people coming to us, they don't want it to be visit after visit after visit after visit. Now, there are some people, some types of patients who enjoy the visits, right? They want the visit, which is basically they want the method. These aren't the goal or problem type folks. And you got to keep those clear in your head too, because the perspectives I'm sharing here are mainly for goal problem type folks. There are some people who want the methods. Those people are happy to pay you for the methods and they want to come as much as they want to come. And they're happy to pay you for that. So you don't have to have any kind of inferiority complex or devil on the shoulder or imposter syndrome or anything like that, because these are the people who actually want visits. That's what they want to do. They're not trying to achieve anything. Their goal is the method, if that's making sense. So I know I'm covering a lot of stuff in this video, but you got to kind of be clear on like which types of patients you're dealing with. Are they goal problem type patients or are they method type patients that just want to experience your thing? Those people, you should have no guilt whatsoever about selling them more visits, because more visits is that's what they want. They want to come in for appointments. They love it, right? Which is fine. It's not that one group is better or worse, but if you're dealing with goal problem people, you may want to have a different offer structure or something to consider so that you don't have to feel like when you give them a realistic recommendation and you say you need to be here 10 times within the next 4 weeks in order for this to have a reasonable chance of success, you don't want to feel like you're overselling them 10 visits or like you're, being a scumbag or something, because it's aligned to reality, right? So there's one piece is just own that. And the other one is maybe create an offer structure where you're like, we have a monthly membership. You can just pay for the month and it includes up to 10 visits, up to 12 visits, whatever, over a month. And this is the price. And when you start to get better, we also have like an annual maintenance membership, whatever. You can create all these things you want and make it how you want. But the point is the incentives are aligned so that the person isn't paying per method. They're paying more for their goal or their problem with larger chunks of time. This takes the pressure off of you. It gets more buy-in for them in terms of they're thinking long-term now, not visit to visit. You don't have to sell every visit because that feels really smarmy when you start to do that too. But that's the trouble with this. Like, I feel like I'm just scamming people. One is if you really know what you're doing, you won't feel that way because you're delivering like 10x results on their price, basically. Like when I take somebody in like to Modern Vitality and it's, $7,500 or $10,000 for an annual membership there, I am very comfortable with that price because I feel like it's so asymmetrically weighted in their favor. When somebody has a complex chronic health condition and they can't work and we can get them better, they're going to go back to their $50,000 a year, $100,000 a year job. This is a wonderful thing, right? And that's just what you can measure. That's not even including like quality of life stuff, being able to dance at the daughter's wedding, being able to travel and keep up with their family, being able to just wake up excited about life. These things are like priceless, right? It's hard to put a dollar value on that, but when you start to break it down and go, okay, what actually like ROI wise, like return on investment wise, what I'm actually delivering for people, and you can get like even a 2x is good. You should be proud of that, right? But if you can start to build up like, hey, I'm giving like a 10x value here, you don't need to feel like you're scamming people. You're helping them. You're setting them free. So, do a good job with that. In terms of plateauing, right? I've plateaued. How do I grow without seeing more people per hour or shortening my treatment times, right? So when you're selling your time, the only way to grow financially is to sell more time, right? Or to sell less time for the same price. So that would be selling more time would be working longer hours in the clinic. Selling the less time for the same price would be shortening your treatment times, right? Or shortening your time you're spending in each room with each person so you can fit more people in per hour, essentially. And if you're at a point in your practice where you don't want to do that, where you don't want to see people every 15 minutes or every 10 minutes or every 5 minutes or whatever, if you don't want to do that like kind of high volume thing, then you are going to be capped in terms of how many people you can fit in during any given day because the hours are capped, right? So then it's like, how do I grow? Well, the next thing to do is raise your price, because that's the only other way you have to move in terms of getting a bigger income in that model, right? So you can raise your price, which, as I've already said, like if you're finding that you're delivering, 100K worth of value, then raise your price. That's okay. You can do that. But the other thing to kind of consider is going beyond that model, right? So, and this is one of those things where practitioners get confused because they think I'm like, close your brick and mortar. I'm not. You can run multiple models at the same time. You can keep the time for money model going where if you want to see one patient every 90 minutes, you can do that. And at the same time, on your days off or whatever, build up something online where you're using fractal systems, where you're doing annual memberships, and where you're helping people with big, gnarly, specialized problems in your own way, building a community around that, getting an international presence. That kind of income, what that does is that sets your brick and mortar free, because now your income's offset, right? So you've got all this stuff going on online. There's a lot of money coming in. You're building systems where your digital clone is doing most of the work. I mean, this is why we do this stuff, guys. Like your ability to help people compared to the effort that you have to do to create those results, that ratio starts to go up asymmetrically in your favor and in the patient's favor. It goes up for everybody because they're getting videos they can watch. They're getting your attention like in a chat forum. You don't have to do the Zoom calls and have a booked schedule with this stuff. You don't. You can for a little while you're getting it set up. You can. I teach that. I recommend that if you need to. But eventually, you'll get through the growing phases of that where you can get rid of that entirely and you have no time commitments. You make things on your own schedule for your online folks. And you do a good job and you help them and they get better. What that does is now you've got this huge stream of income coming in, and your brick and mortar clinic there's not all that pressure on your brick and mortar to sustain your cost of living, to support your family with, right? To do anything. Like the brick and mortar starts to become, it's interesting to say it this way, but it's like the brick and mortar is the main thing, right? And then you build up this kind of side project online, and then eventually, if you can, the online thing will take over and become the main thing, and the brick and mortar becomes kind of the extra, the fun thing, right? There's not all that pressure on it. So you can go and you can give these, long treatments for your local people. You can be in the room for a whole hour. You don't have to be like rushed and doing high volume, all that. You can still make a great income because it's been subsidized by this brick and mortar pet project that has become an animal, but that also doesn't require so much daily maintenance as a brick and mortar would. It's really kind of interesting way to flip it. So that's one of the things to do is like set up multiple streams of income, multiple kind of businesses, multiple models. And this doesn't have to be overwhelming because you've already got a brick and mortar going. So you just add in an online thing on top of that, do it right. Don't do what everybody else is doing with all this funnel stuff and getting people on sales calls and all that discovery session stuff. Don't go down that road unless you're intentionally doing it a little bit just as like training wheels. But essentially you don't have to go there because it doesn't have to eat your whole life. This is the thing about the fractal systems. It gives you time freedom. And sometimes you may fill some of that time freedom with your local brick and mortar. And that's totally okay. Like some of our members here, there's one especially I'm thinking of who does craniosacral, right? And if you're watching, you know who you are. And craniosacral takes some time. You can't rush that. You can't shorten those visits down. It takes some time to settle in and drop in and do that kind of work. And when you set up online systems around that, you can have other income sources coming in, which then allows you the luxury of the time freedom to really drop in without having to raise your prices astronomically, without having to work longer hours in the day to fit more patients. You want to be able to handle your needs, and the online thing can do that, can really set you free. So I've plateaued. How do I grow without seeing more people per hour or shortening my treatment times? The model is capped. Those are the ways to grow within that model. So you have to look outside that model. You have to expand that model, and then those problems kind of disappear. It's like going from a square, like a two-dimensional square, to all of a sudden you're in 3D with a cube. It's a whole different existence. So that's what we do here. All right, get to work.